Hey, and we're back with another episode of the Unfair Advantage podcast, and I am your host, Brad Starnes. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Mr. Mike Kitko, who's the owner of Inner Wealth Global. I've known Mike for quite some time now, as we're both members of the Builders of Authority Mastermind. Mike spent 5 years serving our country as a non-combat U.S. Marine before climbing the ladder in the corporate world. In Mike's words, every time he climbed the corporate ladder, he became more unfulfilled in life. This then resulted in him and leading to him getting fired from 2 C-level positions. And since 2016, Mike has used his journey of becoming miserable in corporate America to escape it for personal freedom as his unfair advantage to help other entrepreneurs grow and become more fulfilled in their lives. But before we dive in, let's not forget that today's episode is sponsored by Screaming Cow Marketing Group, which is a full service marketing agency in St. Louis, helping home service businesses grow their leads through utterly unforgettable marketing experiences. So if your business is looking for more of the right work to do, you can call the guys who move. Mike, welcome on.
Oh, it's great. Great to have that kind of introduction. And I'm kind of admiring the sponsorship. Like I was listening because I've got my own podcast and I'm listening.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's a cool little nugget. But hey, thanks for letting me be on here, man. I'm excited to jam with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm honored to have you on here, and I can't take too much credit on that intro. There's this guy named Matt DeCourcy who lives in Kansas City. He owns a podcast, or I guess was on a podcast called Startup Hustle, and he owned a company called Full Scale that he just exited from. And so basically, they helped founders grow their teams with hiring developers overseas. And so basically this whole podcast was framed around talking with entrepreneurs and the hustle and the hurdles they go through and everything. And he had those little like tidbits and everything in there. So when I knew I wanted to launch a podcast, I'm like, I'm taking that and I'm running with it.
Super cool, man. That there is no thievery in the entrepreneurial space, man.
Right. Absolutely. So I want to jump through. So prior to hopping on here, you actually kind of informed me on something. I kind of mentioned it in your intro. So you had spent 5 years as a U.S. Marine, but you mentioned as a non-combat Marine. And so I wanted to kind of touch on, before we get into the corporate world and all of that, what that means, because that was something that I didn't know. And then from there, how your journey as a Marine led into your early success in navigating, your role in corporate and everything like that.
Yeah, awesome. So look, and I got emotional when I was telling you that, because, and I'm getting emotional now. If you look at the world since 2001, there's conflict, there's combat, there's skirmishes, there's wars, there's battlefields all over the world. And when I say that I'm a Marine veteran, people automatically associate that with you're in combat. And listen, this is the emotional part for me. There's a lot of guys in the world that are getting shot at on a regular basis and that have gotten shot at. And I've got some very, very close friends of mine that were in combat and their lives will never be the same. They're mentally and emotionally not the same human being as when they went to combat. And I don't want any of their glamour or glory or credit. And I'm not saying that war is glamorous. I'm not saying there's glory in it. What I'm saying is they deserve the respect and attention for the sacrifices that they made for the rest of their life to keep us safe. So I did my part, but it was a small part. I was never in a war zone. I was never in a combat zone. We were on alert. We were on a tarmac ready to deploy, but I was never in a combat zone. And I just want to make sure that light gets shined on the people that really deserve it. So Whenever I say somebody says, hey, thank you for your service, I just like to say the Marine Corps did more for me than I did for the Marine Corps. But to get to your point, the Marine Corps taught me leadership. The Marine Corps taught me intensity. It helped me harness my intensity. The Marine Corps sharpened my focus. The Marine Corps sharpened my commitment. The Marine Corps sharpened me as a human being in terms of don't quit until the mission's accomplished. So that, I mean, the Marine Corps built that in me, and that was immediately useful in the corporate space. So,
Yeah.
Brad, when we were talking about, the path to success that I've experienced, when I left the United States Marine Corps, I was an E5. I was a sergeant, and I was a leader of Marines. I was a leader of a shop, and considered. I got a fitness report, which is like an evaluation where I said I was the number one NCO, non-commissioned officer in my unit. And that was because of the intensity and the focus and the commitment and the passion and just the take no shit, right? Do no harm, take no shit approach that you've seen in me.
Yeah.
And that just gave me an unfair advantage, like, because all of those things had always been in me, but I was never allowed to use them. So when I was a kid, I walked too fast and talked too fast. I was too much. I was too loud. I was too animated. I was too intense. I was too everything. And the Marine Corps says, hey, take all that stuff and let's be more of that. And I thrived in that environment. So in corporate, I always stuck out. When I jumped from the Marine Corps into corporate, I always stuck out. And, when all I can say is I would join a new business, and I was in a conference room with a bunch of leaders, and somebody asked a question, and even on day one, they would look at me for the answers. I couldn't explain it. There was just almost a leadership vibe that I bring in to the table in my energy or whatever, and people leverage that. And over time, about 16 plus years, I just kept riding the ladder of success, man. And I would always get promoted, and I would always get, training, and I would always get raises. And I mean, it just came fast and furious and hard and heavy. I rose the ladder of success really, really rapidly, but my ladder was up against the wrong building. If you've ever heard that. I rose the ladder quickly, but man, I was so far out of the zone that I was intended for. Because the only thing I ever loved in corporate, the only thing I ever loved in the Marine Corps was developing people and developing teams. I can do that at a world-class level, but managing P&Ls, the managing operations, managing logistics, managing materials, managing all that shit was just, it just clouded the, I didn't love any of that. I only love building people and building teams and developing them. And when everything fell apart and I got to rebuild, I just chose to only do those things.
Yeah. Wow. It's one thing I look back and, growing up, like I hardly did, athletics, anything. Like the few that I did, I failed very quickly at. And that's one thing that I look at, like being an athlete and being in the Marines, the Army, anything like that have in common is that it helps build discipline in a way, like, and that's discipline that growing up, like I never had in a way. And so that's one thing that as you're talking through, like the discipline aspect of, like, I think you and I talked about this, like you were up at the same time every day, you made your bed a certain way, you reported in a certain way, and it was the discipline day in and day out that I'm sure even now to this point, how many years later, is still relevant in your life, and that a lot of people don't have that discipline that you have when it comes to, like, even though you only enjoyed those two things and you hated everything else about it, but you had the discipline in a way to come in every day and make sure that shit was getting done.
No doubt. Yeah, no doubt. You don't go to bed with, with things unsettled around your house. And I mean, it's as simple for us. It's as simple as we don't go to bed while there's dishes in the sink. We don't leave the house in a way when we wake up that it's in disarray. Like we kind of like close the day in a harmonious kind of like beneficial way, so we can open it back up the next day. But yeah, I'm up between 4 and 5 every single day with no alarm clock. I follow my body clock, and my body starts to shut down somewhere between 8:30 and 9:30. Between 4 and 5, my eyes pop open. I'm energized. I'm excited. I'm enthusiastic because I don't have any obligations in my life. I only do things that I get to do. I only do things that I love. And I have employees, I have business partners, and that kind of do the things that I don't love, but they love them. So, we each fit into our zone, and I get to be the creative in our business, and I get to create content. I get to teach, and those are things that light my soul on fire. But I want to go back to the Marine Corps, and you said discipline. Listen, Marine Corps boot camp, very, very simple. I mean, it blows people away when I tell them there's only two things that you need to do to graduate a Marine, right? Do what you're told and don't quit. Do what you're told and don't quit. You do those two things, you will graduate, right? Because they spend a lot of money investing in you to get you to, for me, Paris Island. They want you to graduate a Marine. So just do what you're told and don't quit. And if you do those two things, you'll graduate. And now in the entrepreneurial space, it's we know what to do and don't quit. I mean, and that success comes from those things. Do what you need to do what you need to do, and don't quit. Do what you need to do and don't quit. When you do that and you commit and you do it in a way that's persistent and resilient and intense and passionate and committed, you're going to succeed. And it's not like the journey is easy, but it's very simple. You know what you need to do every day to move the needle. Just do those things and don't make excuses for them, and don't quit. And if you don't quit, you'll win.
It's crazy you say that. So I mentioned in the intro, you and I are in this Builders of Authority group, really focused on like building the personal brand and all of that. And Adam McChesney, who leads that, I've known him for quite some time. And I remember like June, July of last year, Adam's telling me like discipline. And like what I thought was discipline wasn't discipline. And it was like I just got back from a cruise, and I am leaving for the airport like 45 minutes before we leave the week before last, and I send off a contract to a new client from personal branding, this and that, and he like signs the contract as I'm like boarding the plane, and I'm like, holy shit, like this is awesome, it was a 1-year contract, da 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 da. And I remember sitting on that plane and thinking to myself, like, if I just would have been more disciplined sooner, I would have been achieving what I'm achieving now 6 to 9 months ago. And it's like, at the time, I thought I was being disciplined, but I was just like, I was being disciplined enough. And then I was finding every excuse in the world to try to like pat around that and to keep me going and make it look like I was being disciplined when I actually wasn't. And so that was one of the things like when I was on my trip, like I was just kind of like, vacation's meant to kind of decompress, get in your thoughts, like really think about things. And that was one thing that I realized like while I was on my trip was like, I used to think I was disciplined, but I was far from it. So.
Yeah. But if we go back to, and you and I, we didn't, I didn't know the discipline story. But if we go back to that time, Brad, and if we were to unpack that, something happened that shifted you to a new gear. All right. What was that?
My wife got laid off in June of last year, and about 99 days prior to our wedding.
So let me tell you what happened. Okay. Now this is I'm a mindset guy. So and humans, there's a Buddhist maxim: if we all sat around a campfire and told our deepest, darkest secrets and all of our stories, we'd all laugh at each other for lack of originality. So what happened, brother, is there wasn't enough pain to really make you disciplined, and then when the pain became too much, then the needle moved and the shift happened. And this is why there's a lot of people in this world who are living mediocre, average, mundane, lemming-like, Groundhog Day lives, and they're going to keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over every day until they take their last fucking exhale, because there's not enough pain. And there's not enough pain to move them into action to do something different. That's exactly what happened to me. So I was riding the ladder of success. I hated what I was doing because I was up against the wrong wall, right? I was just going up the ladder of success, and it kept getting more and more painful as I got higher and higher on the ladder, because I was getting farther and farther from alignment of what I really wanted in my life. And when I fell the first time and I got fired, right, I was like, okay, I had a president one time. I worked for a president, and he said, listen, if you haven't been fired once, at least once, you're not a professional. So when I got fired the first time, I'm like, I'm a professional now, right? It was almost like a badge of honor, right? And then I went back, I got a 5-month severance, and me and my wife drank it away because I was in really bad shape. But in this 6 month, I got another job, another executive level position, and I was there for 15 months before everything fell apart. And before I got fired again. Now, I was 300 pounds. I was suicidal. I was drinking at really toxic levels. My wife and I, we had a completely abusive marriage, mentally, physically, emotionally, like sometimes sexually. Our kids were raised in a physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually abusive household. So there was like no peace and no harmony here. The only thing we had was money and a title and some authority, right? So when I got fired the second time, I'm like, all right, that chapter's closed. Like, that's done. And I even I even interviewed a couple times trying to get back into the corporate game. But when I realized my resume was Swiss cheese, it just, there were so many holes in it. I wasn't going to come back from that. And I realized that chapter had closed, and there was enough pain to move me into a different place. And that pain created the shift, the pivot that was required to help me really take inventory of what I wanted in my life. And I wanted to be self-employed. I always wanted to be self-employed. I always wanted my own business. But I didn't believe in myself enough, so I stayed in a corporate game. I didn't want my marriage anymore. Now, I wanted to be married, but I didn't want my marriage anymore. The abusive lifestyle that was involved in my marriage. I didn't want to be 300 pounds, and I didn't want to be suicidal. So I made the necessary shifts and the pivots. I even filed for divorce from my wife. And after I filed for it, because we had threatened a billion times before that. But when I literally did file, that's when like we signed a peace accord. Like I'm not Angie, my wife, I'm not going back to that old lifestyle. I'm not going to get a corporate job. We're not going to have an abusive marriage. Or I'm out. And it was that kind of no excuses. I'm not settling for a shitty life anymore. And that's why we get to live the life that we live now, that's full of time freedom and financial freedom. And if you don't own your time, you don't own your life. And no one owns my time, and nobody calls my shots. Here's the most critical part of this. And this is the coolest part, is the reason I was employed is because I didn't believe in myself enough. And my first full year in business, I exceeded any corporate income that I ever made. Because when I got in my zone, developing people, developing teams, I'm unstoppable, man.
Yeah.
That is my unfair advantage, is my zone of genius. Being in my zone of genius, that is my unfair advantage. I don't do things that I hate. I only do things that light up my soul, man. And people can feel that, and they throw money at that.
Yeah, it's crazy. So like I've been freelancing, doing websites and everything for 10 plus years. Like it's always been a side hustle, but I've always had that other thing, the corporate thing, or me being in college, finishing school, all those things. I had a different business that I ran before this, raised a bunch of money, built a team, built the app, all that stuff. Didn't work out, closed down. And it was like, I went back into the corporate world for 6 months and realized after 6 months, like, this is absolutely miserable and I am never doing this again. And I actually got to the point where there was conversations going on of like, do we move you to a different role? Like kind of like along the lines of like, we got to find you a different seat on the bus or we're going to kick you off the bus. And on your point of like that guy telling you that once you get fired once, like, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I was like, there's no way in hell I'm getting fired. I'm quitting this job. And so it was like, that was kind of originally what like pushed me out back into being an entrepreneur. And then I just kind of like, in a way I'd almost say I was numb to the pain that I'd gone through up until that point. And so just kind of coasted along until my wife got laid off in June of last year. And then it was like, then the pain became even more unbearable. And it was like, holy shit. And I had to like really focus in and then narrow in on like that passion and everything like that. Cause I had just kind of made the leap and I was like, I don't necessarily know where that passion was at. And so it took me a while, even after making that transition, to find it. And so I say that because I bring up like you went from being in corporate to now you're running your mastermind and all that, which, by the way, for anybody who's listening, has not been to one of Mike's mastermind. I think you got one, coming up April
We
6th?
we don't have April
Oh,
anymore. We do have June 8th and 9th in New Orleans.
June 8th and 9th in New Orleans. So anybody's listening, if you can make it to that, I would, because I left that weekend. It was 2 days, and I just drove home in silence for like a 45-minute drive, because I was like, my whole belief system and everything was changed after that weekend. But anybody who's listening to this and like is in that position that they're in a corporate role, they're wanting to make that leap. I know of one individual who he actually was handed like a partner application to become partner in the firm he was working for, and said, yeah, not happening. Actually, I think cashed out part of like his 401k
Mm,
and bought like a lawn and landscape company. They're doing well. He's got time freedom, all of that. But that was like the path that he chose. And you chose leading your mastermind and all that stuff.
yeah,
But people at that point feel, and you kind of touched on it, feel so lost and broken that it's like you have to have pain and passion. You're going to have enough passion to pull you forward, enough pain to push you forward.
yep,
So, but it's hard to find what that passion is when you've been so far out of touch of it for so
sure.
long. So what was that process that you went through to like realize that like this is the passion that I was always called for, and this is the direction that I'm going?
Yeah, so let me start this way. Well, the answer to that question, I wrote a book called The Imposter in Charge, and I talk about this in The Imposter in Charge. And I didn't even know that I was talented, Brad. So it was the things that we do with a genius level are so easy for us, we don't even know they're valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, like I've got, next month in a couple weeks, we're going down to Dallas. I got a paid speaking event down in Dallas. We're going to go down to Miramar, Florida, in a probably 2 weeks after that, and we're gonna attend a leadership workshop there where I'm leading a group of leaders, and I get paid to do that. We get paid, our mastermind, we get paid to teach, and I'm an author and I'm a podcaster, and I get paid to teach and instruct and to guide people to where they want to be in life. And when I was sitting in my corporate gig, I remember I got one memory in my mind right now. I'm sitting with a guy and I'm having a discussion about what he wants to do with his life and where he wants to be, because I manage manufacturing plants and he was a machinist. And I was like, where do you want to be? Like, you're not meant to run a drill press the rest of your life. Where do you want to be? What do you really want? And he started telling me what he loved and what he wanted to do. And literally, I got a call on my phone, like, Mike, you're late for the meeting. Or are you going to be here? Like, because I would get lost in that, Brad. I would get lost in that space where there's nowhere in the world at that moment that I wanted to be than with that guy unpacking that dream in his chest cavity. You know what I mean?
I love those conversations.
that is what has been trying to get out of me my whole life. That's why I was a good Marine, a good leader of Marines. That's what made me a good corporate executive. Not running P&Ls, not running operations, not running materials, not environmental health and safety. None of that shit mattered to me. I didn't give a crap about any of it. But you put an employee in front of me and I will get their dream out of them, and I will make it become real for them, with them, and I will light up their soul. And I didn't know that was valuable. I didn't know that was a talent. I didn't know. All I know is it felt really, really, really good.
Yeah.
And when I made the pivot from corporate to entrepreneur, before I made the pivot from corporate to entrepreneur, I still didn't know that there was value in that there was worth in that. I just thought that's something that as an executive, you got to do every once in a while. And then I found this thing called coaching. Like, I hired my first coach, but I hired a coach to help me get on track. But I remember being on a call with him one time going, holy shit, I'm paying this guy to do this with me. Like, how can I do this? I want to do this. I want to be the one on the other end of the phone guiding people through this process. But I didn't know I was a talented instructor. I didn't know I was a good speaker. I didn't know that I could move the needle with people in their dreams. I didn't know, but I just knew it felt really good to do it. So in that journey, it's what do you do like easily, effortlessly, that you're good at, that you enjoy, that you get lost in time. This is called your zone of genius. And it feels so good. And we in the hustle culture, and I don't love the hustle culture. I'm just going to be honest, right? I'm not a grind guru, and I'm not a hustle whore. But in the hustle culture, we've applied value to hard. The harder it is, the more we believe it's valuable. So when you take your zone of genius, it's so easy, it gets lost in translation. You don't see a value in it. But the things that are easy for you, that are effortless, that you get lost in time, that you enjoy, that lights you up, that increases your energy, not depletes your energy, that's where your most valuable assets are. But they feel so good, sometimes we dismiss them as it's just something I do. But that's really what, like, the gift that you have inside of you that's trying to get out. So when I'm in front of a crowd, when I'm lighting their souls on fire, when I'm bringing the freaking heat, it just feels good. And nobody picks up their phone and gets distracted because they're tied to my every word. And I'm not joking about that. Like, I've been in a room of 250 people, and I've been in the front of the room, and I had a gal pull me to the side after my speaking engagement saying, Mike, I have literally never seen 250 people not touch their phone for an hour, because that's the passion, the intensity, and that's the zone of genius that I was born to like live into. So start there. What are you really, really good at? And let's monetize that. There's a Japanese concept called ikigai. And I love ikigai. Four areas, 4 considerations. What am I really, really good at? What do I love doing? What do people need? And what will people pay me for? And when you put these 4 elements together, you'll never, ever work another day in your life.
I think that's crazy that you will never work a day in your life. Like I was chatting with somebody a couple weeks ago. They're like, retirement this, retirement that. And I'm like, I don't ever want to retire. No. It's like as long as I'm doing what I love, like there won't be a point in retirement. Yeah, will I maybe pull back on certain things or not do as much in one area, but it's if you are in that zone where you're always doing what you love, like you and I were talking prior to getting on this, of like I just came off of vacation, like it was 7 days with travel, it was like 10 days away from my house. It was like that was way too long, and it's like for a lot of people that's like a dream. Like, how can I get away for 7 days from the life? Like vacation is a escape. And it was like, we were a couple days into that. It's like, I'm loving the life I'm living. Like this vacation in a way, like don't get me wrong, had a great time, enjoyed it. It was relaxing, all that stuff. But it was like by day 4, day 5, I'm like, I've almost had too much relaxation and I want to get back to the life that I was, doing and everything like that. And that's what a lot of people don't get to experience because they are so unfulfilled in what they are doing in life.
Yeah, absolutely. They're living a life that they have to live instead of a life that they get to live, right? And then they get to go on vacation, but they have to work. And I think the magic is in changing that have to work to get to work, right? But this isn't really a job, right?
Yeah.
Brad, you've seen me. You've been at one of my workshops. You've seen me in action. It's not hard for me, is it?
No.
It's not work for me. There's passion, there's intensity, there's heat, there's inspiration, there's like I just serve hard, but it's never a sacrifice. It's never hard. It's never work for me. I get to see people's lives transform. Why? How can that ever be work for me?
Yeah.
When that's what I love to do.
I think during that mastermind weekend, out of every 10 times that I looked at Mike, there was maybe 1 or maybe 2 times that Mike did not have some sort of grin or smile on his face. And it's because you just love what you do. And the 1 or 2 times that you did not have it was probably because of the fact that you were getting emotional about whatever you're talking about. Yeah. And so you were crying or beginning to have tears rather than grinning because it was emotional to you.
Hell yeah.
And it was never of like a blanket face of like, I'm just not like just not happy, just not vibing with this kind of thing.
No,
So
there's nowhere else I'd rather be. And I want to back up because
yeah.
this isn't only available to me. It's available to me because I chose to believe in myself. It's available to me because I was courageous enough to make the jump. It's available to me because I've learned to trust myself in uncertainty. These things are available to anyone. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's just when we started this episode with my time in the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps helped me with my commitment and with my courage and with
Yeah.
my ability to trust myself. It helped like amplify those qualities, and those immediately translate into corporate, and they immediately translate into entrepreneurship, because all entrepreneurship is eat what you kill, right?
Mm-hmm.
All we do is we solve, as entrepreneurs. First of all, we fix the world, but entrepreneurs run this world.
Yep.
But we solve problems for people, and we get paid handsomely to solve the problems for people. And the bigger the problem you solve for people, the more money we make. So as we continue to learn how to solve bigger problems for people, our bank account grows.
Mm-hmm.
But the basis of our entrepreneurial ventures is there's something that somebody wants, and we fill that need for them. So in my case, people don't believe in themselves. They're not living the life true to themselves. They're not living the life of their dreams. They know there's something more that they're not fully extracting from life. They're living a life. They're waking up not wanting to go where they need to go, and not wanting to do what they need to do or whatever. And they know they're ready for a shift because there's enough pain.
Yeah.
And when there's enough pain, you'll do anything to get to that passion instead of the pain.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's and it's exactly that process I went through last year. So
Heck yeah, man.
definitely get that. So I want to, prior to wrapping this up and everything, one of the things that I want to kind of touch on quickly is, so you'd mentioned as you're making that kind of transition from corporate into, making the leap of faith into entrepreneurship. In your case, you were fired from your job. You had interviewed for a couple, but you had basically at that point, you didn't have a job. You decided to go all in.
Right.
There's a lot of people who will wait until they have some sort of income revving up on the side, which is the right or wrong way, depending on
It's okay.
on which way you look at it.
Sure.
But in your case, that didn't happen. And so I'm just curious, what did that process look like for you? Because going from having this type of income to having nothing basically until you began selling like crazy is a huge jump to make. So I always hear that as a excuse as to why you don't make the leap. And then the other excuse that I hear is because of health insurance. And obviously you have kids and all that stuff. And so those are the two things that I'm like, I got to get this like squeezed in prior to the end of the episode, because I'm very curious as to like what your response to that. Because one thing I've learned about Mike is any excuse you bring Mike's way, Mike's going to take it and just like shove it into the ground, because in his opinion, there isn't some. So I'm very curious on your input on those two things.
Listen, we had some reserves. All right. So, I mean, we made a lot of money, and I made a lot of money, and I put a lot of money away, but it was all in retirement accounts and 401ks. I was doing it the right way. So, but what I remember when I started taking draws on my retirement accounts and my 401k, and when, I don't know if you guys, if everyone's aware, but when you start to draw on your 401k, you take massive penalties.
Yep.
Massive. So I decided, excuse me, I decided that because I had fucked up twice and because I had lost my job, my family's quality of life wasn't going to be impacted by that. My family's quality of life wasn't going to be impaired. But what happened was I started taking draws out of my 401k. And there was this story running through my mind, Brad, that if I used any of my savings and my reserves, that like I was on the verge of bankruptcy. And as I saw that drawing down more and more, and it felt like my back was up against the wall, when that plan B went away, it was like, I mean, it was a done deal. When we have a plan B, and I'm going to speak to the listener, if you have a plan B, be prepared to use it. You're going to need it. And when that plan B goes away, then when your back's up against the wall and you commit and go all in, you'll crush it only
Yep.
every time. Because when human beings, we are awesome at fighting our way out of conflict, out of struggle. But if it's comfortable enough, there's no need to fight. You won't fight. And I'm not saying that we need to like always have our backs up against the wall, but what I know is if whenever in my life my back's been up against a wall, I've always won. I'm undefeated. Like I
Yep.
won't be beaten. I won't be knocked down for long. And I would share, like I would help kind of encourage everyone to think, how many challenges and obstacles have you had in your life and how many times have you died? And if you're listening, obviously the
0.
answer is you've had a lot of challenges and obstacles, but you haven't died yet.
Yep.
Don't think that the next time that you're scared or you're uncomfortable, you're going to die. It's just discomfort. It's just you're in unfamiliar territory, and you got to grow into the person capable of creating what you want to create. So in that moment, I had never built an entrepreneurial venture. I had never been self-employed. I had never made $1 of money or of income by my own brand and because of my own name. But I had to learn how to do that. It was very uncomfortable. It was scary because I watched my savings go down, and it felt like imminent collapse and bankruptcy was right there on the verge. But man, when the chips are down, I'll win. And I did. I went all in on myself and the creation process. And this is what we teach in the workshop. Three aspects, the 3 C's, the 3 parts of having anything you want in this world. And this journey taught me this. Get really, really clear about what you want. Everybody knows what they don't want, but very few know what they really want. Get really clarity. Number 2 is become certain. There's doubts in your mind that you can't have it, that it's not available to you, that you might fail. Let that shit go and let certainty take its place. Where you're clear and you know you can have it, and you know it's not if, it's when. And then just stay committed in the process. And commitment is take inspired action, be really, really patient, and then watch and receive that as that shit shows up. And it will, only every time. This process will not let you down, but you've got to be willing to get really clear about what you want. You've got to be willing to let go of the stories of I can't, I won't, it's not available, I'm not good enough, right? But I'm underprivileged or whatever. Let go of all of that shit. Replace those stories with certainty. And go all in on yourself, and you'll crush it only every time. I've never not seen this process work.
Yeah. It's, as you're talking, I'm like, damn, I wish I would have known Mike like 9 months sooner, like right before my wife got laid off and everything like that. Cause that was kind of the mindset I went through. It was like, I didn't want when she got laid off, I didn't want our quality of life to change. And I'm like, we're going to cut some things back. We're just going to keep going. And I cashed out my 401k I had from that last job, and we depleted our savings. We had a little credit card debt we built up. And it was like, it actually, like I mentioned a little bit ago, that it was like when she got laid off was probably the point of pain. But as you were just talking, it was the point at which we had no more of a lifeline left because we couldn't open up another credit card and we were maxed out. And it was like at that point was when it was like balls against the wall, and I was hitting, firing at all ends. And then because of that, not that she wasn't doing the work to try to find a job until then, but she was now at that point firing all in. And all of a sudden we find her a job within like a week and a half, 2 weeks of us, like me looking back, like us, like finally putting like our foot down on the gas pedal. So those just thinking through that, I'm like, if I was going through this, if I knew Mike and I was going through this, maybe I would or wouldn't have used that lifeline. But looking back, it was a lesson. We talk about we don't do losses. It was a lesson that we learned that obviously are going to be a huge setup for success for us in the future. So
in that first job that I lost, I got fired in August of 2014, and I had a 5-month severance. And just when it ran out, that was like when I started my next job. It was like I spent a couple months playing around with the idea of getting another job, but when it was really time, it was time. Yeah. And when I got clear about what I wanted, that I was ready for a job showed up. So I was my benefit or my severance carried through December, and on January 5th, I think, of 2015 is when I started my next job. So
Yeah.
it's always when we're ready, it shows up. We're not always ready, but when there's
Yeah.
enough pain, you'll get ready.
Mhm.
And when you're ready, it'll show up.
It's like in that 5 months that you had that severance, if you would have gone all in what you're doing now with Inner
Yeah.
Wealth Global, it's like, holy shit, like where is it you would have been now? You could play all the what ifs and all that, but
But I was a drunkard at the time, man. So we used the 5 months. We just used all that severance, and I picked my girls up from the bus stop drunk every day. At 2:00, 2:30, because we just hit noon happy hour.
yeah.
And I mean, I was just wasting my life away, Brad. There was
Wow.
no quality of life in my life back then, and now I live for quality of life. If it negatively impacts my quality of life, I ain't doing it. Like we got one time, man, one
Yeah.
time to live, and we got a limited number of exhales, and I intend to enjoy every single one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mike, thanks again for hopping on today. This episode could go for like 4 hours if I wanted to, because I just enjoy being on calls with you and listen to everything you have to say. For anybody who's listening, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review so we can continue to produce more episodes like this, and share this episode online on Facebook, LinkedIn, anything along those lines, so we can get what Mike's gone through in his transition from corporate America to being an entrepreneur into the hands of others who are going through that same journey. But until next time, this is your Unfair Advantage.